So we're talking to a lot of different people on that. You know, we're recovering from the hurricane also. Florida did get hit, not as hard as we anticipated. And you look at Georgia, you look at South Carolina, North Carolina. I'm going to North Carolina right now, North Carolina, to have a rally for Dan Bishop. But before I go to the rally, we're going to be stopping at one of the sites that got hit very hard by the hurricane. So we're also recovering from a hurricane, but we have to be very careful. Everybody needs totally proper documentation because the Bahamas had some tremendous problems with people going to the Bahamas that weren't supposed to be there. I don't want to allow people that weren't supposed to be in the Bahamas to come into the United States, including some very bad people and some very bad gang members and some very, very bad drug dealers. So we are going to be very, very strong in that. Let me just explain. Large sections, believe it or not, of the Bahamas were not hit. And what we're doing is bringing the people to those sections of the Bahamas that have not been hit. We've done a lot of the USA aid. We've done a lot of work with our Coast Guard, with our FEMA people who have been phenomenal. I mean, they have been phenomenal. So we'll see what happens.
This is Trump justifying his administration turning away hurricane evacuees trying to escape the devastation left behind by Dorian by claiming that there were bad people, gang members, and drug dealers. And if that rhetoric sounds familiar, that's because it is.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Now, I wonder what Mexicans and Bahamians could possibly have in common that might be irking Trump. This comes in the aftermath of an incident on a ferry from the Bahamas to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in which over 100 hurricane evacuees were forced to disembark.
Really just a heartbreaking situation for these hurricane evacuees. We were on the ferry with them coming back to Fort Lauderdale late last night. They waited hours to get on the ferry, so relieved when they finally made it on, and minutes before that ferry pulled off the dock, they were told they had to get off.
Ferry passengers were told they could travel to Fort Lauderdale with their Bahamian passport and a copy of their criminal record. But when they got on the Balearia ferry, this announcement was made.
When you come into the USA, you will have trouble. So please, all passengers that don't have U.S. visa, please proceed to disembark.
Because whereas Bahamians had always been allowed to travel to the US with a passport and a printout of their police record, this week the people whose lives were completely upended by the storm and actually needed to get off the island suddenly face the additional red tape of needing a visa to do so. Because this is the week that the government should be introducing hurdles for people who've lost everything. And what would this government's inhumane treatment be without another given, denying responsibility?
Among them, Renard Oliver and his baby girl.
They were saying that they just got a call from CBP, and CBP told them that everyone that doesn't have a U.S. visa and who's traveling on police record has to come off.
Crew members blamed the U.S. government, but U.S. Customs and Border Protection said it was the ferry company, Balearia's fault, saying they did not work with them ahead of time.
If those folks did stay on the boat and arrived, we would have processed them, vetted them, and worked within our laws and protocols and done what we had to do to facilitate them. I think it was a business decision by Balearia to remove them. They were not ordered off the boat by any government entity.
Because CBP is now claiming that they never made the request, which leaves the ferry company that made the unilateral decision to enact its own visa requirements for entry into a country? The ferry company? Give me a break. The craziest part is that while Trump has gone on a 10-day tirade defending the state of Alabama from a hurricane that quite literally was never going to even hit the state, there are actual people who've lost everything from Hurricane Dorian. And instead of showing them sympathy, CBP and the administration that oversees it are actively making their lives more difficult. And on top of that, lying to diffuse responsibility. But it's the predictability of all of this that makes it so much worse. Of course, Trump's initial reaction to black people is suspicion and baseless allegations, but these are moms and dads and babies and young kids who've lost their homes and their possessions and, in some cases, their friends and loved ones. Even in the aftermath of a catastrophe, Trump quite literally can't manage to rein in his racism long enough to help lift up a community that's just hit rock bottom. And it's ironic given the fact that Trump wants nothing more than to preside over major disasters. When he hears about a big hurricane, he's half a step away from trying to take Al Roker's job from him, bragging for some unknown reason about how this will be the biggest storm we've ever seen, as if he's counting it as his own personal accomplishment. But the way he's responded to disasters like these in places like Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, where he can't pander to potential voters, is proof that beyond the excitement of a big wet storm, he loses interest the second it passes, once it's time to actually help human beings. Of course, we're still in the beginning of hurricane season, so for the sake of those whose lives are about to be impacted by any impending storms, let's hope that it's in a place in which Trump stands to benefit politically, so at least they'll get relief instead of scorn.